When I came home that Thursday evening and found my entire living room full of cardboard boxes, my first thought was that I must have had the wrong house. I stood in the doorway in my nursing scrubs with my bag sliding off my shoulder, just staring. There were boxes stacked against the walls, stacked on top of each other in the hallway, sitting on my grandmother's antique side table that I had specifically asked everyone not to use as a surface. My mother-in-law was directing the whole operation like a general, pointing here, pointing there, telling my husband where to put things. My sister-in-law was pasvikaukwatch with her shoes on, scrolling through her phone. My mother-in-law looked up when she heard the door. "Oh, good, you're home. Can you move your car to the street? The truck with the rest of the furniture gets here in an hour." I couldn't speak for a moment. What is all of this? We're moving in, obviously. We talked about this. We absolutely did not talk about this. She turned to my sister-in-law. Didn't we talk about this? My sister-in-law glanced up from her phone just long enough to shrug. We talked about it. I found my husband in the kitchen making himself a sandwich, completely unbothered. He looked up when I came in, mild surprise on his face, like he'd forgotten I would eventually come home. "Can you please tell me what's happening?" I asked. He set down the bread. "My mom and sister need somewhere to go. I thought I mentioned it." "Dylan," I kept my voice even. "You did not mention this." "I'm pretty sure I did." "I would remember." He picked up his sandwich. "The house is big enough. We have 3 bedrooms." And that was it. That was the entire explanation. 3 bedrooms, as if that settled the question of whether people could simply decide to move into your home without us asking. That was the night everything changed. But I should explain how we got here first. My grandmother left me her house when I died, and I want to be very specific about that. She left it to me. Not to my parents, not split between her grandchildren, not held in some family trust. To me directly, because I was the one who showed up when she got sick. I drove her to her chemo appointments every other Wednesday for 14 months. I stayed over on bad nights. I was there at the end. When the estate attorney read her will and I heard my name, I had to put my head down for a few minutes before I could look at anyone. The house was a 3-bedroom craftsman in a good neighborhood, fully paid off, worth about $420,000 at the time. My grandmother had lived there for 42 years and kept it beautifully. I was 26 years old and I had never in my life expected to own a house. I met my husband around that time. He was a freelance graphic designer, charming, good at making people feel seen. He was the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and surprised you with it. He didn't make a lot of money, but I genuinely did not care. I was a registered nurse. I had a stable income and now, astonishingly, a house. Money wasn't the thing I was looking for. I was looking for someone who felt like home, and for a while, that's what he felt like. We got married. We moved into my grandmother's house together. For the first few months, things were good. He set up a home office in the spare bedroom. I planted things in the backyard like she used to. We had people over on weekends. His mother visited once a month or so, which was fine. His sister came once, about 2 months after we moved in, and spent the entire visit walking from room to room with an expression I couldn't quite place. Not admiration exactly, more like assessment. "This fireplace is original?" she asked, running her hand along the mantel. "Yes, we had it restored." "We," she repeated with a small smile that I told myself meant nothing. She left after a few hours, and I pushed the unease down and didn't think about it again. Over the following months, the visits from my mother-in-law became more frequent. First every few weeks, then every week, then twice a week. She would let herself in while I was at work. My husband had given her a spare key without mentioning it to me. And when I came home, I would find small things rearranged. The spices on the counter, a framed photo moved from one shelf to another, the blanket folded differently on the couch, individually meaningless, collectively a slow, deliberate claiming of space. When I brought it up to my husband, he said I was making things up. Then he said I was being dramatic. Then he said, "She's just trying to help." And the way he said it, slightly impatient, like I was the unreasonable one, told me he'd already had the conversation with himself and decided whose side he was on. My sister-in-law went through a divorce that spring. I did feel genuinely sorry about it. My husband asked if she could stay in our spare room for a couple of weeks while she figured out her next move. I said yes because I had a spare room and she was family and 2 weeks seemed manageable. 6 weeks later, she was still there. She'd brought a second load of her things. She'd rearranged the spare room completely, hung her own artwork on the walls without asking, and reorganized my pantry one afternoon while I was at work because my organizational system, as she put it, didn't make any sense. She left the displaced items on the counter for me to deal with when I got home. I asked her once, gently, how the apartment search was going. She looked at me like I'd asked something absurd. "It's expensive out there. Why would I rush when I have a room here?" I looked at my husband. He looked at something on his phone. The dynamic that formed over the next several months had a particular texture that's hard to describe from inside it. It wasn't one explosion. It was 100 quiet incursions, each small enough to dismiss on its own. My mother-in-law began giving me cooking instructions in my own kitchen, standing over my shoulder and correcting my technique with the confidence of someone in their own home. She started buying groceries and handing me the receipts without discussion. I paid them because disagreeing felt like more energy than I had after 12-hour shifts. She told me my work schedule was inappropriate, that keeping such long hours wasn't right for a wife, that I needed to think about priorities. I was a charge nurse in a trauma unit. My hours were my hours. My sister-in-law left the house every morning around 10, came back in the evenings, never worked as far as I could see, but always had new things. New clothes, new bags, new little luxuries appearing in her room. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about where they came from. I was too tired. I should have spent more time thinking about it. My husband's position through all of this was not a sudden shift. It was a slow erosion. He went from "I'll handle it" to "can you just try harder to get along" to, eventually, flat silence when I brought up any concern at all. He started spending his evenings on the phone with his mother. He started sighing in a specific way when I entered rooms where he and his sister were talking, like my presence was the imposition. Once, I sat down with him and said, very plainly, "I need you to tell me honestly what's happening. I feel like I'm living in someone else's house." He said, "What I see is my wife who has everything, making my family feel like nothing." I went back to work the next morning and picked up an extra shift. And then came the Thursday with the boxes, and after the boxes, the kitchen table conversation, which I have replayed in my head more times than I can count. I asked him, calmly, to explain how this had been decided without me. He said the house was big enough. I said the house was mine. He said it was ours because we were married. I told him the deed was in my name alone. Inherited property, never retitled jointly. "That's just paperwork," he said. I looked at him. Since when is a property deed just paperwork? He didn't answer that. Instead, after a pause, he said the thing I think he'd been holding back for a long time. "You act like having a rich grandmother makes you special. You didn't earn this house. You just happen to be the favorite. And the least you can do is share something you never worked for with people who actually need it." The kitchen was very quiet. "Did you marry me because of this house?" I asked. He looked down at the table. "I married you because I wanted to build a life with someone who had a house." He didn't answer. He had run out of ways to say what he meant without saying it directly. But it was already said. It had been said in the silence and the shrug and the months of watching his mother take over my kitchen while he found other rooms to be in. My mother-in-law came in from the hallway at that moment, and I could see in her face that she'd heard enough of it. "Is there going to be a problem?" she asked. "No problem," I said, and I meant it, because standing there in my grandmother's kitchen with its original tile and its 40-year-old window over the sink, I felt something clarify inside me. Not anger, something colder and quieter than anger. The recognition that I had been enormously patient with people who had read my patience as weakness, and that this was about to stop. I called my dad the next morning from the hospital parking garage on my lunch break. My dad has been a real estate attorney for 31 years. He handled my grandmother's estate when she died, which means he knows this property better than anyone alive. I told him everything, in order, without editorializing. He was silent the entire time. When I finished, he said, "The house is solely in your name." "Yes." "It was inherited prior to the marriage and was never commingled or retitled jointly." "Correct, Joe." His voice was very measured. "That property has no marital interest. Your husband cannot claim ownership. No one you have not placed on that deed can claim ownership. This is not a gray area." I already knew this, technically. But there is a difference between knowing something and having your father say it in his attorney voice, with 31 years of case law behind him. "What do my options look like?" I asked. "They're good. But first I want to ask you, are you done with this situation?" I thought about the boxes in my hallway, the shrug at the kitchen table, the thing he had said about my grandmother. I thought about 12-hour shifts and coming home to a house that no longer felt like mine. "I'm done," I said. "Then let's get started," my dad said. What followed was not dramatic. It was paperwork and patience, which, as it turns out, are the two things I am best at. I started by pulling up my Amazon order history and going through every transaction for the past 5 months carefully. There were 14 orders I had not placed. Skincare, clothing, a cashmere sweater, 2 sets of wireless earbuds, some kind of Bluetooth speaker system. Total value, $1,140. All delivered to my address. IP address on every order traced to my sister-in-law's device. I documented everything, then filed a report with my credit card company and a police report for unauthorized use of a financial account. I said nothing to anyone in the house. My dad prepared the formal paperwork, a revocable trust, cementing the property in my name and insulating it from any future marital claim, and a notice to quit, a legal document requiring all non-lease occupants to vacate within 30 days. Fully enforceable, no exceptions. I also quietly started staying at my dad's apartment on my days off, telling my husband I had early shifts. He never questioned it. He was too comfortable to be suspicious. 3 weeks after the boxes arrived, on a Saturday morning when everyone was home, I served notice. I set 3 envelopes on the coffee table, while my sister-in-law was on the couch and my mother-in-law was in the kitchen. My husband had come downstairs and was standing in the hallway. My sister-in-law looked at the envelope. "What is this?" "Open it." She read the first paragraph, then she laughed, high and sharp. "You're joking." "I'm not." My mother-in-law came out of the kitchen, wiped her hands, opened her envelope, read it slowly, then looked up at me with an expression that I think was supposed to intimidate me. "You cannot evict your own family." "You're not on a lease," I said. "This is not your home. You have 30 days to vacate. My son lives here." His envelope is on the table. My husband looked at me like I had done something to him. "Personally, you actually did this." "The property is mine. The law is clear on that. If any of you would like a more detailed explanation, I'd suggest hiring an attorney." There was a long moment where no one spoke. "Your father put you up to this," my mother-in-law said. "My father drew up the documents, yes, because he's an attorney and I needed one." "You're going to regret this." "I don't think I will," I said, and then I went upstairs and started making calls. The weeks that followed were loud. My sister-in-law cycled through disbelief, fury, and negotiation in rapid succession. My mother-in-law called me selfish, ungrateful, damaged. She said things about my grandmother that I won't repeat here. My husband went through his own process. First certain I would back down, then briefly consulting with a lawyer friend of his, who apparently told him the same thing my dad had, because he went very quiet after that conversation and stayed quiet. The credit card dispute resolved in my favor in under 2 weeks. The police report prompted a call to my sister-in-law from a detective, which prompted her to call me in a rage, claiming the purchases were basically communal because we shared a house. I didn't argue. I let the process run. In small claims court, she was ordered to reimburse me $1,140 plus filing costs. She paid within the week, in cash, with the expression of someone who has been made to swallow something very unpleasant. The house was empty by day 29. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law moved into a 2-bedroom apartment together. My husband packed his things into his car in several trips over 2 days. On the last one, he sat in the driveway for a while before he left. I watched from the kitchen window, and I felt something that wasn't quite grief but was adjacent to it. The mourning of a version of things that had never actually been real, just well performed. Then I went out back and pulled the weeds that had taken over one corner of the garden while I'd been too occupied surviving to tend to it. The divorce was straightforward. There was almost nothing to dispute. The house was mine. We had no joint property, no shared accounts. He took his equipment, his car, his design files. The whole thing was finalized in under 5 months. He texted me once, about 2 months after he moved out. The message said, "I hope you know this isn't what I wanted." I read it several times, looking for the part where it was an apology. I didn't find it. I deleted it. His mother never called. His sister sent a message through someone we both knew, saying she didn't want things to end on bad terms. I thought that was a remarkable thing to say, given everything. I didn't respond. I was promoted to charge nurse 8 months later. My dad took me to dinner at the Italian place my grandmother loved, and we had wine and talked about her for most of the meal. He said she would have handled the whole thing faster than I did. "First week," he said. She would have had them out the first week. He was probably right. She didn't waste much time on people who took her kindness for stupidity. The house is quiet now in the way I always wanted it to be. The kitchen is exactly as I left it when I come home at night. The side table is back in the entryway where it belongs. In the backyard, the garden is coming in better than it ever has. I bought new dish towels, my own, not the ones that got claimed and reorganized and borrowed until they didn't feel like mine anymore. I think about what I would tell someone in the same position, watching the same slow encroachment, making the same calculations about keeping the peace. I would tell them this. Patience is not a virtue when the people you're being patient with have decided that your patience is their permission. You are not obligated to give up space in your own life because someone else has decided they want it. You are not unkind for holding on to what is yours. You are not selfish for finally, after far too long, acting like you believe that. My grandmother worked her whole life for that house. She left it to me because she trusted me to take care of it. I did.